All men hate the wretched. How then must I be hated, who am miserable beyond all living things? Yet you, my Creator, detest and spurn me, thy creature, to whom thou art bound by ties only dissoluble by the annihilation of one of us. You purpose to kill me. How dare you sport thus with life? Do your duty towards me, and I will do mine towards you and the rest of mankind. If you will comply with my conditions, I will leave them and you at peace. But if you refuse, I will glut the maw of death until it be satiated with the blood of your remaining friends.
Alright, so welcome to episode 6 of the Postmodern Prometheus. I'm Asha.
I'm Nancy.
This week, well, we were going to discuss the first 4 chapters of Volume 2 of Mary Shelley's 1818 edition of Frankenstein, which included the first half of The Creature's Tale and the kind of lead up to that. However, it would seem we have a lot to say about just the lead up, so we're just talking about the lead up this week.
Yes. As usual, we were unable to be concise, and this happened.
Anyway, so to give a brief, plot summary of the sections we're talking about today, basically, we start off where we left off. Justine's just been axed.
Yes. As I have here in my notes, she was the victim of being associated with the Frankenstein family.
It is be a deadly, deadly game. It really is. Like, Beaufort, and then, like, Caroline married one. Like, I mean, don't marry a Frankenstein if you want to live, or don't work for a Frankenstein.
Don't be associated with one.
Yeah. Do not associate with the Frankenstein clan. Anyhow, so yeah, Justine has just died. The family is in mourning. Alphonse is like, Vicky, stop being so glum. Let's go on holiday so you feel better. So they go on holiday to Bellerive, where I think they have a...
Holiday house?
Yeah, it said they had a holiday house in Bellerive, but I don't think... They're not actually at their holiday house in here. Well, that's just a plot hole if I ever saw one. Anyhow, so yes, they're at their not holiday home in Bellerive.
No, they did go to their house at Bellerive.
I thought they were like at an inn and that's where he wanders off from. I swear they were at an inn.
Well, they go to their house at Bellerive.
Look, it doesn't really matter, I suppose. Anyhow, so they go to Bellerive to like soak in nature and like enjoy stuff and all of that.
Yep.
And then because Victor is a sad glum boy who doesn't want to be around his family, he goes on a solitary, and I think an ill-advised solitary hike, though he says, like, I've done this walk path before, it's fine, I don't need a Sherpa, I don't need a guide. I mean, he is fine, there are no accidents. But anyhow, so he's off, and just as he's, like, about to start enjoying life again, who should turn up but his son, El Creatio. Yeah, basically, and then the creature's like, come over to this hut and we'll have a chat and I'll explain why I did what I did and why you should, like, help me out. And Victor's like, no, but, I mean, I guess I kind of do owe it, fine. And so they go to the hut and then the creature regales him with the tale of everything that has happened to him thus far, and basically as an explanation as to why he killed William, because as we said in the last one, he's not at all denying the fact that he killed William at all. Mm-mm. He's just like, yep, I did it, and here is why it was your fault. Which, you know, anyway, so yes, we'll now go into like a proper like analysis and like I guess a more thorough look through these sections. I just wanted to throw out like a bit of a plot summary ahead of time, because we haven't really been doing that as we've been doing these chapter by chapter episodes, and I think that could make it a bit confusing for people who maybe don't know the novel. So I just so people like know, sort of have context for what we're talking about as it sits within the text, I suppose.
Yeah, but obviously we recommend that you're reading this text as well, or maybe you're already familiar with the text in some ways.
Yes, but we like to encourage all listeners.
Yes, and it's good to actually refresh our own memories about what's happening, really, because I know that everything kind of just blurs together in my mind, even when I've read this section of the book just recently. I just still can't remember.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Mary Shelley has this weird kind of writing style where I feel like everything is both super condensed but also like super like elongated at the same time. It's probably because she like goes into like a lot of detail about certain things and then just really skims over other things, and that's very my opinion. That's very much to do with just when she knows about things, which is relates to something in this section too. There is long passages that go into a lot of detail about the mountains and the views of nature that Victor and Fam see as they're like traveling by carriage and then by like horseback through from their home to Belrive. At least I think that's where they're going. Maybe I'm wrong. That doesn't matter. They're looking around the mountains. Nature brings joy and all that shit. Where was I up to? I completely lost my train of thought. Yeah. No, I remember it. So Mary Shelley goes into a lot of detail about the mountains, and she does that for, I think, a lot of scenes of nature. She will give a lot more detail, which I think it's a very interesting comparison to, you know, the stuff about like the politics of certain, you know, the politics, the legal system, like science, household chores of villages, which will all sort of be skimmed over or like not gone into as much detail with, which I think it's partially, I guess, just the like romanticism sensibilities and like what writers at that time in that genre did sort of dwell on, but it also very much speaks to you know, when she's writing about what she knows, there's like a lot more depth and like flow to her language compared to, you know, when it's about the sciences and it's all very vague, and then the legal system, it's all very sort of vague, and it doesn't take away from the novel, because at the end of the day the ideas are more important than the logistics and I guess the realism it's based on. But like, yeah, it's an interesting thing anyhow.
Yeah, I think she does focus a lot also on characters' emotions and feelings and their reactions to the external world as well. And that's really where the drama of the story is at. It's very internal in a way. I mean, Frankenstein is known as a sort of horror, almost action-y type of novel. It might get adapted that way. But really, it's a very sort of internal, it's about sort of internal changes and reactions and changes in emotions and things. So
yeah, I mean, as we said, I guess, during the creation scene, that is a very subdued moment compared to characters just kind of like looking at mountains and feeling a swell of
something
inexplicable bliss.
The sublime.
The sublime. It's beautiful.
Yes. Yes.
Anyhow, let's, I guess, now jump, I guess, into the text.
Yes, let's do that.
So, did you want to talk at all about Papa Frankenstein's speech about death and getting over it that we sort of mentioned a bit in the last one, or you sort of drew attention to it in his letter and it comes up again? Did you want to talk about that, or are you happy to mosey on through?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that, again, like in an echo of Caroline's death, that Frankenstein the elder here is advocating for sort of acceptance of death. He says that he loved... do you think, Victor, said he, that I do not suffer also? No one could love a child more than I loved your brother. Tears came into his eyes as he spoke. But is it not a duty to the survivors that we should refrain from augmenting their unhappiness by an appearance of immoderate grief? It is also a duty owed to yourself, for excessive sorrow prevents improvement or enjoyment or even the discharge of daily usefulness, without which no man is fit for society. So he's saying here, I think, that what Frankenstein is doing in indulging in his grief, obviously he doesn't know the extent to which Frankenstein is responsible for William's death, is really a sort of thing that contravenes against the requirements of society for someone who suffers a grief to go on living.
It's very much Claudius's speech to Hamlet, which, like, I don't think there's any, like, symbolic meaning in that, but it is basically Claudius's speech to Hamlet.
Yeah.
Tis unmanly grief.
Well, yes, I think there's definitely a strong parallel there where both these characters, Victor and Hamlet, they kind of represent the irrational or a sort of emotional and romantic, in that sense of the literary idea of romanticism. They are those sort of romantic figures where emotion becomes all-consuming and, like, very central to who they are and what they do. And they will kind of stop caring about anything external to that, like Hamlet obviously does. But I think it's interesting that you're not really sure whether Mary Shelley is critiquing this sort of approach to grief, especially because of that ambiguity where, you know, Victor is somewhat responsible for William's death, so his grief is not unwarranted, and it's not based purely in mourning the loss of his brother. It's guilt and sort of regret for himself as well. So I wonder if there's a kind of critique of his sort of selfishness here that's beyond what his father says about, you know, attending to your duties as part of society. Yeah.
I don't think Mary Shelley's necessarily critiquing the advice Alphonse gives, and I guess the, you know, just the grief and moderation thing. I don't know, I feel like the role of this speech is, I know, it's serving to show how isolated Victor is whilst also being surrounded by people. In that, you know, he's been given advice which, I don't know, probably for the time maybe is perfectly reasonable. I mean, it's 200 years ago. Mortality rates are not great. You know, at this point, Mary Shelley herself has had lost her mother and, like, had a miscarriage, has, like, known death. I think it probably, like, is considered, like, a reasonable statement, and maybe the role of this speech is just to show how isolated Victor is because he can't sort of speak, or at least he's not allowing himself to speak to his family and say what is wrong. So they are making false assumptions about, like, you know, why he is in this state.
Sure. Yes, I definitely agree with that. And I think even now this would be a fairly reasonable speech. I mean, because he doesn't undermine Victor's grief for, the reasons that he assumes Victor is sad. He's acknowledging the grief, but he's saying that you must go on. And, I think that's fairly reasonable, because he's not saying you must repress everything. He's just saying this is fine, but, you got to remember that...
Titanic music plays in the background. Christ. Okay. He has this speech, and then this whole next section is kind of talking about just Victor and his melancholia, and how he would just break into bitter weeping and just, I think, row out onto the lake and just lie there for hours and wanting to kill himself but then not killing himself. But he is Hamlet. So he just row out onto the lake in a little boat and just sort of lie there under the stars and dwell on misery. I think
he really is the Hamlet of Switzerland.
I say I was tempted to plunge into the silent lake, that the waters might close over me and my calamities forever, but I was restrained when I thought of the heroic and suffering Elizabeth, whom I tenderly loved, and whose existence was bound up in mine. There he goes, thinking about someone other than himself. What a good boy. This is the only time that ever happens.
But I think he still thinks about Elizabeth in terms of his own existence.
Yeah, but there's okay, if we want to just give Victor way too much credit for 1 second. There is an acknowledgement here that Elizabeth's kind of fate is tied up in his, because the only path she's kind of been given is his wife.
Yes.
There is an acknowledgement of that there. There's no acknowledgement of the fact that that's,
wrong,
unfair and wrong. But there is at least, she is a person who exists, who needs him.
Yes. No, I think Victor is being uncommonly selfless here. Yes, we certainly never see him being so selfless again.
Yeah. I thought also of my father and surviving brother, as he will from henceforth be called.
And will be forgotten.
Should I by my base desertion leave them exposed and unprotected to the malice of that fiend who I had let loose among them? At these moments I wept bitterly and wished that peace would revisit my mind, only that I might afford them consolation and happiness. But that could not be. Remorse extinguished every hope. I had been the author of unalterable evils, and I lived in daily fear lest the monster whom I had created should perpetrate some new wickedness. This is the book, in essence, is just Victor's insanely dramatic inner monologue in which the creature is called just a million different things, followed by to whom I had created or to whom I had given life, to whose existence I had most miserably bestowed life upon. And it's kind of dude, we get it. Stop bragging. We get it. You made life. Big freaking whoop.
It's he's humble bragging each time he's blaming himself.
So he was this monster, but I made him, remember?
Yeah, remember. Gosh, I just... Yeah. I love how he's goes from thinking about his family to then immediately thinking about himself, and how he's so wronged and how he's so remorseful, but obviously he couldn't tell anyone. It's Victor, you are bringing all these things upon yourself. Just tell someone.
Anyhow. So and then It goes into some interesting stuff with Elizabeth, where
Is Elizabeth Ophelia then?
no, Ophelia has more agency, which is really saying something.
Wow, that's a low bar. Well, I think there should be an adaptation of either Frankenstein or Hamlet, where the creature is just the manifestation of suicidality. And
You go write that play.
And in that case, it would make sense for both Ophelia to die by him and everyone else. I can't remember.
Okay, well, let's put a pin in that. We'll discuss that a bit later. We'll have an unrelated Hamlet podcast some other time, just for fun. Because, I have a lot of, thoughts and feelings about Ophelia, but this is neither the time nor the place.
So we could have done this Frankenstein podcast except with Hamlet and with Hamlet's hundreds of adaptations.
Well, I guess we can do that when we get tired of doing Frankenstein adaptations, maybe.
I think we should just start a second podcast.
We can barely manage this one. Yeah. So following Papa Frankenstein and Victor's very much one-sided conversation, Elizabeth and Victor have another very much one-sided conversation where Lizzie basically uses Victor as kind of her journal or diary, which is kind of nice, I think. You know, someone's got to use him like the tool he is. And yeah, this section, it really does, I guess, show this kind of depth and character development happen with Elizabeth that personally I really like. Especially since it kind of foreshadows the creature's tale in a way, which is quite interesting. I feel like it's probably definitely intentional, in keeping with the themes. But I'll read a bit of it.
Yep.
When I reflect, my dear cousin, said she, on the miserable death of Justine Moritz, I no longer see the world and its works as they before appeared to me. Before I looked upon the accounts of vice and injustice that I read in books or heard from others as tales of ancient days or imaginary evils. At least they were remote and more familiar to reason than to imagination. But now misery has come home, and men appear to me as monsters thirsting for each other's blood. And then, a bit later on, she says, Alas, Victor, when falsehood can look so like the truth, who can assure themselves of certain happiness? I feel as if I were walking on the edge of a precipice towards which thousands are crowding and endeavouring to plunge me into the abyss. William and Justine were assassinated, and the murderer escapes. He walks about the world free and perhaps respected, but even if I were condemned to suffer on the scaffold for their same crimes, I would not change places with such a wretch.
I think that was such an interesting speech here, because she also really there's so much sort of irony here as well, because really she is speaking to William's murderer essentially, and he has escaped and he is respected. And she sort of separates herself from Victor here, well, unknowingly. But I think it's so interesting, and she very much, like you said, she parallels herself with the creature, as she also kind of recognizes the monstrosity in human nature in the way that Justine has been treated, and that's the same realization that the creature eventually comes to.
Yeah, and the very last bit of her sort of speech I wanted to say, which she then starts again with, My dearest cousin, you must calm yourself. These events have affected me, God knows how deeply, but I am not so wretched as you are. There is an expression of despair and sometimes revenge in your countenance that makes me tremble. Be calm, my dear Victor. I would sacrifice my life for your peace. We surely shall be happy, quiet in our native country, and not mingling in the world. What can disturb our tranquility? Like, it's this weird, she wants to, like, shut them away from the world. And then earlier, at the bit I read earlier, she was sort of saying how this idea of, like, the vice and wrongdoing was so alien to her that she thought they were just from stories. And now she's realised it's real. Like, it's this very much this kind of, like, loss of innocence for her. And all she wants to do is, like, just take her family and just go to their, like, native land. They're very, they're very closed off, tight-knit family group, and just, like, push the world away.
Yeah.
Which I was, like, likening that to the creature because it's this idea of, like, ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
That I think you get in the creature's tale too, because he is initially quite content and happy when he is living this very simplistic life, just sort of enjoying just nature and just had very few wants. But he still has this desire to kind of learn and see more. And then the more he sort of learns, the more miserable he becomes.
Yeah.
Because he discovers, how horrible the world is, particularly because it's quite very horrible to him.
I agree. And I think the instinct in Elizabeth to sort of withdraw and just retreat to a place with her loved ones is the same as what the creature has once he's been exposed to the, horrors of humanity. Is he wants his female companion and he wants to retreat into sort of wilderness and disappear and isolate themselves from the world. And it's very interesting that this is the same instinct as Elizabeth. I think, it's an interesting parallel also because Elizabeth here is obviously a feminine character, and in a lot of ways I think the creature is identified with femininity as well. And I think that's it.
Lovely.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting bit of, I guess, foreshadowing perhaps. I've been saying for, like, his story, but also, just this, like, odd connection between these two characters, which I wish was more explored in the novel, to be honest.
Yes, I think really he and Elizabeth might have, like, I don't know if Mary Shelley was suggesting this at all, but it seems as though Elizabeth would have been accepting towards the creature. At least, I don't know. That's what fan fiction would have.
Yeah, no, I think certainly adaptations have made her sort of accepting or, like, wanting to help him.
Yeah.
I think most notably, well, maybe not most notably because not many people know the musical, but it happens in the musical. Scratch that. Probably most notably in the Danny Boyle play with Benny Cumberbatch and the other guy who plays Sherlock.
Johnny Lee Miller.
Yeah,
but
that one.
That one, if I recall correctly, it's very disturbing because there's sexual violence.
Yeah, it's that whole scene is done very disturbingly, but it still permits a conversation between them.
Yeah.
In which she does sort of kind of want to help him, but also is scared of him. And I think, the thing with the novel is there is no, at least not seen, there is no conversation between them. He just kills her. It's, I don't know why my brain just went here, but it's kind of like how in Dracula adaptations, the relationship between Dracula and Mina is given a bit more significance, particularly him when he tries to feed off her and turn her into a vampire. It's more of a romantic thing in certain ones, whereas in the novel he just does it to kind of, like, piss off her, like, male friends.
I think maybe it's to do with when texts are, I guess, seen through a female gaze. Maybe there's more desire then to have that sort of romantic aspect of it drawn out more, like the potential of it to be explored more, rather than this sort of I guess we see the novel through Victor's very patriarchal male gaze, where Elizabeth is kind of lacking any sort of agency, as we said earlier. And maybe that sort of moment between her and the creature that, we never see in the novel is that moment of asserting some sort of agency before, she has to die eventually for the purposes of the plot.
For plot-related reasons.
But yeah, you can really see that, it's really a missed opportunity, I think, to have a sort of moment of connection between Elizabeth and the creature where they recognize the ways in which they are very similar and might, be connected as well through Victor and their role in society as well.
Very much a thing.
Okay, did you want to move on?
Yeah, so then the following bit after that is basically them just, the family just leaving to go wherever the heck they're going, Bellerive, I believe. Just a trip around the mountains to, like, cheer
Why are they
everyone up.
always going to Bellerive? They're never at Bellerive.
It's about the journey, Nancy, not about the destination.
Bellerive is a state of mind.
And then we realised we were all Bellerive. Anyway, they're on a trip. It doesn't really matter where they're going.
I think we just really haven't paid attention to where they're going.
No, well, I don't know. Mary Shelley just, name drops a lot of places because, as I was saying before, I think geography of Europe is something she really knows about. So she's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to freaking show off now. Whereas, a lot of other things she's got no idea about.
But also maybe she's also humble bragging about, check out my summer trip.
I've travelled. What have you done?
Anyway,
so they depart, they go on a journey. I don't think there's really much to comment on in a lot of this Frankenstein family holiday bit, because it's just kind of Victor being sad and everyone else being like, come on, dude.
Yeah, and then Victor is finally cheerful again, and his father was pleased, and Elizabeth was overjoyed, and everyone is happy because he's happy. God knows why. Probably because he's a miserable bastard otherwise.
Well, you know how there are certain people that if they're really in a bad mood, they just bring everyone else down. And it's not necessarily that they're the center of everyone else's world. It's just that I don't know, they just have a very
that their emo-ness
broad aura that they just sort of push their negativity onto everyone else. So when that person is happy, everyone just kind of exhales with relief.
So
I think he's one of those people. I think that's why they're all happy.
Yeah, so he's basically just being less emo than usual, and everyone else is just more relieved.
Everyone is just exhaling. The one sort of funny-ish thing was that when they go on this journey, he does sort of specify that him, Elizabeth, Dad, and younger brother are going, and then about a paragraph later it says my father and Elizabeth were much fatigued. Ernest, who had accompanied us, was delighted and in high spirits. And it's kind of we know Ernest was with you. You mentioned it
just then.
Did you just forget that you had specified that Ernest was there? It's I don't know, it's just, I don't know why this bothers me so much, but it's just kind of yes, we know Ernest accompanied with you. You said he was there. Just because you forget Ernest exists doesn't mean I do. I mean, we do.
I think it's safe to say that we are Ernest's biggest and only fans.
Ernest, stand for life. Anyhow, let's just keep moving on. And then, yeah, the other funny thing about this section, because, yeah, in a lot of this, like, nature stuff, nothing really significant happens. That's why we're just, like, rambling on about, like, random odd bits. But then she, like, quotes, like, a whole, like, stanza of one of her Percy Shelley's poems. And it's, like, really cute. It's also, like, really unnecessary.
Yeah. I think maybe this is the reason people thought that it was written by Percy Shelley, because it was obviously standing Percy so hard by, like, just citing his works directly.
Like, because she's popped a couple references in before, but they've only been, like, maybe a line or two. This is, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like, 8 lines of poetry from his poem Mutability. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's very like doesn't need to be here, but I'm kind of glad it is, because it's just very cute.
I mean,
it's cute that she's quoting her Bay. It's cute.
Okay.
Anyhow, okay, now we're getting to the interesting bit where he's gone off on his solitary hike, and he is just about, like, enjoying himself. He's, you know, nature hasn't quite been, like, bringing him the same joy it usually does, but he's finally at a moment where he's almost happy, and he says, "And is my heart, which was before sorrowful, now swelled with something like joy? I exclaimed, wandering spirits, if indeed ye wander, and do not rest in your narrow beds, allow me this faint happiness, or take me as your companion away from the joys of life." As I said this, I suddenly beheld the figure of a man at some distance, advancing towards me with superhuman speed. I think we can all guess who this superhuman person is. And
Yes, so I wonder, actually, just to go back to the bits where he's kind of wandering on
Mont Blanc? Or Mont Civ? I don't know.
No.
He's on a mountain. It doesn't really matter where.
Okay.
No matter what Mary Shelley says, it doesn't really matter where he is.
No, to get back to this part where he's on Mont Blanc, I'm just wondering whether, is he, like, does he want to kill himself in this scene?
I don't, like, deep down, yes, but, like, but in his, like, immediate consciousness, no.
Yeah, because I think I never really noticed this before, but it seems like he's kind of gone to this mountain deliberately to sort of, I guess he says to be, you know, recover through the sublimeness of nature or whatever, but it feels to me like he's going there because he's driven by a sense of action or something, and he wants to, I don't know, he's just kind of,
I don't know, I think, you know, there is this kind of, like, emotional, like, phenomenon of, like, wanting to find some peace in, like, joining nature, and then in that, there is, I guess, maybe a bit of a fine line between just peacefully observing and plunging oneself into it. It's kind of like if you're standing by, like, a really fast moving, like, river or something, and there's a bit of, like, peace in, like, looking at it, and then you might have, like, a really obscure morbid thought to, like, plunge yourself in and join it. I don't know if this is, like, a universal feeling, but, like, it is something that has, you know, a weird thing that's, like, gone through my head before. And I'm not someone with suicidal tendencies. I never have been. But it is this just, like, weird, I don't know, this weird desire to sort of join nature. So, like, maybe on, like, some level he does want to end it, but I think, I don't know, I don't think he either doesn't have the, I don't want to say doesn't have the courage to go through with it, because I don't like that as an idea, But I think, you know, he's tried to reason with himself whether he should or can kill himself, and he's decided no, that's the irresponsible thing to do, and he's sort of sticking with that. And so he's like just maybe like wandered up to this place and is maybe hoping that like something will kill him.
Yes.
Like I think it's more that I think he's hoping something will happen that will take the decision away from him and just end his life.
Right. I think yes, and he's also kind of looking for actually maybe a more positive reason to stay alive, maybe, because
yeah,
he
that
says,
too, definitely.
you know, allow me happiness or take me from the joys of life. So I don't know, maybe he's kind of not quite believing that he can feel, you know, not emo anymore.
Yeah.
And
he's like searching for, I guess, something to live for.
yeah, and then it's, you know, obviously the moment of destiny when
This is my moment in the sun.
when his child returns to him and the decision is effectively taken away from him, but
Yeah.
it's not by nature.
Or is it? Maybe. Well, no, it's not, but I guess it depends what you consider. Well, that's actually like a thing I wanted to chat about.
Yeah.
Is that throughout the novel, I think pretty much every time Victor starts enjoying life, which is usually has something to do with nature, you know, so like after his like mental breakdown, him and Clavel go on like nature strolls, and he starts to feel happy again, and then he gets the news about William. When he's coming home, he like takes a bit of a amble through the wilderness and sort of like is watching the lightning, and I think not necessarily, he doesn't necessarily become happy, but some kind of peace hits him, and then the creature appears, and now again he's starting to feel joy again, and the creature has reappeared. So it's kind of every time he starts to feel a bit of joy, sort of a reminder of what he's done comes like crashing back to like beat him back to the ground. And it's kind of it's interesting because is that this kind of like cosmic karma, because it's definitely like a symbolic element.
Yeah.
It's like definitely symbolic, but is it cosmic karma, or is nature like a character that is punishing him?
I think that's very interesting. I also would be interested to read it in a way where the creature is part of nature, but Frankenstein just is unable to recognize that. Or in a way that says there's no real boundary except an artificial boundary between what is determined to be natural and man-made or artificial in a way. So yeah, I think it does play into those ideas, and I wouldn't say that any of those ideas are self-contradictory as well, because he can be a force of nature come to punish Victor, but he can also be, in Victor's mind, a sort of jarring against what he perceives to be the natural, and the creature is a sort of unnatural marring of what he considers to be natural, and that's why he's kind of shocked out of his joy or whatever, because he has a very limited notion of, you know, what is and what is not natural. So I don't think any of those ideas are, you know, unable to be reconciled.
Yeah, I think the most sort of common and also the most basic reading of this novel is that like Victor defies nature by creating the creature.
Yeah.
I think that's the most common reading, and I think it's also basic, and I also think it kind of undermines the broader themes of the novel, because I think there is a violation of nature, but it's not the creating of life, it's the abandonment of life.
Yes.
Like I that's has always been my personal reading, is that it's very much about this this defiance of nature, but the defiance is not the creation, it's the abandonment.
Yes, and everything that's associated with the abandonment, which is, a type, I guess it's, unkindness and rejection. That is what is unnatural and what prevents Victor from being able to enjoy the beauties of nature is his own actions in abandoning his creation. Yeah, I agree that it is very simplistic to say that it's just a critique of Victor for having created the creature. That's very, I don't think that's what is bad about Victor at all. Like, it is part of what is bad, but it's not the main thing. Like, that's just the instigating action rather than the judge of his kind of character and
it just makes it extra, like, I don't know, interesting, weird when in the classic Hollywood Boris Karloff one, where, like, the reason for everything being wrong is that Igor accidentally gets the abnormal brain rather than the healthy brain. Which kind of, I think, undermines the film's own, like, ideology.
Yes.
Because the film is explicitly like, no, creating, like, defying nature is bad, but also, like, it wasn't really Victor's fault. They got the abnormal brain.
Yes, that's definitely, I guess we'll get to this when we review that movie, but I think it really does. And it also is unnecessary because it actually shows the more sort of the novel way. Sorry. It actually does show the way that in the novel that the creature kind of becomes quote unquote evil, which is through his, interactions with other humans, and learning about human society. So it's not like the movie doesn't show that. So why was it necessary to have the criminal brain?
Yeah, it's odd, but it's also something I think so many adaptations do as well. Like, I think the Kenneth Branagh one, the, like, creature was made out of, like, criminal bodies because that's, like, what you could get. The musical does the same thing. It's this weird thing that does keep coming up, and it really, I don't know if it's done to, like, take some of the blame off Victor. Like, I feel like that's why, but it's, I don't know, it really undermines, I think, the theme of the novel, but also, like, the theme of, like, most adaptations. I
think you're right, but what I feel like it's actually sort of protecting the audience in a way, because in the novel you get the feeling that, it's kind of entirely up to human society that the creature becomes evil in a way.
Yeah.
So you kind of feel blamed or responsible for that, maybe, as the audience. And if, in fact, he is just born criminal, it sort of takes the responsibility away. And I think it might also have something to do with, I don't know, just society's ideas about crime, criminality, what causes people to do awful things. Maybe, that's still a very debated subject in, everyday life. It's, well, who knows?
Who knows? Let's, like, hop on right into the creature, because this is the first we're hearing of him.
Yes.
And he sort of, he just sort of runs at Victor. And Victor prepares himself for battle.
Mortal Kombat.
And then, but when the creature reaches him, he begins speaking to him, like, very eloquently. And, yeah, Victor keeps being like, take up your arms. Oh, fight ya. Ay, 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 ay. And the creature is just like... I think the creature is like, you made me, like, indestructible. Sit down, honey.
Well, it's interesting that Victor first addresses the creature and calls him devil. I exclaimed, do you dare approach me, and do not you fear the fierce vengeance of my arm wreaked upon your miserable head? Begone, vile insect, or rather stay, that I may trample you to dust. Yeah, so he's not endeared himself to this new indestructible creature that he's created and could probably squash him with, like, one hand.
Yeah, he could, but he does not. He just says, I expected this reception. To which I'm a bit like, yeah, you did kill a 6-year-old. Like, let's not play the victim. And and then we sort of
that seems
quoted,
reasonable though.
Anyhow, we quoted what the creature says at the beginning of this episode, and he's basically saying like yes, and it's something he repeats a bit throughout this section because there's a lot of like nonsensical like back and forth where Victor's like, I'll fight you, you damn dirty scoundrel, and then the creature is just like, I am only a villain because I have been treated terribly, but you were like my creator, you were my father, you sort of have obligation to me, and I have obligation to you, and if you do this thing for me, I will leave this place forever. Something. So yeah, he like reminds him of his like filial obligations, something Victor has never considered on his own, and it encouraged. That it does play a bit of a guilt trip on Victor, and that's what leads him to sort of agree to meet the creature at his hut up in the mountains. That he just sort of like points to and says like, meet me there at sundown, and then like just runs, and Victor has to just sort of like hike behind him because he doesn't have superhuman speed. And it's a bit just like, you could have just maybe like chatted as you walked, really.
Or, given me a lift or piggyback.
I don't know, maybe he needed to like tidy up before Victor got home.
Quick, let me hide my... No, quick, I've got to hide my family portraits that I've done of you, Victor, Daddy.
I'm gonna pop the brownies in the oven and put the kettle on.
I've got the cookie dough in the fridge.
So anyway, yeah, as we were saying, the creature is very upfront about the fact that, like, yes, he has taken a life, but is also very much playing the victim card, and does manage to get Victor to kind of, like, shut up and listen to him and, like, come and meet him.
Yes, I think the dynamic of the conversation is very much like, fight me. And the creature being like, no, I'm capable of speech now and I have reasoned arguments. And Victor being like, no, I don't care, fight me.
Yeah, it's really, I don't care, you killed my brother. Like, I think this is the one time where, like, Victor, he's kind of, like, reasonable in his, like, not wanting to listen to things. Because, I mean, again, dead 6-year-old. So, like, the creature hasn't really endeared himself to, like, be able to play the victim card. He still does it. And the creature will never stop playing the victim card, no matter how many people he kills. He will never stop playing the victim card.
Nope.
I think... Look, Victor and the creature are both, like, the worst, but... I don't know, sometimes Victor is, like, a little bit more willing to admit he's in the wrong than the creature.
How dare you?
Until the very end.
How
Victor does
dare
then have,
you.
like, a bit of a turnaround, and then he's like, yeah, this wasn't my fault. And he is wrong. But, like, throughout this section, he's a bit... I don't know. He never really gives, I think, the creature, I guess, the sympathy and justice he deserves.
I'm sorry. Creature is bae and has done nothing wrong.
He has done so many things wrong.
I am a creature apologist to the end.
You're the worst. He kills all the minor characters.
They deserved it. They had it
No,
coming.
they didn't. All the minor characters are lovely.
Clavel and Elizabeth, and especially William, definitely had it coming.
No, they didn't. Elizabeth and Clavel are like the lifeblood and soul of just everything. And Justine is bae. William, I don't know. He's a plot device, but like he didn't deserve to die.
I mean, now I'm just thinking of that song from Chicago.
He had it coming. He had it coming.
I think I just most eloquently expressed my entire feelings towards this novel, which is that Creature has done nothing wrong.
All right.
Look, what can I say? So I think it's really interesting that at the end of this conversation, the Creature really doubles down on his blaming of Victor, and he calls him the author of your own speedy ruin. So he's being kind of overtly threatening here.
Yeah, when he first meets Victor, he's very almost like reverent to him. He's like, you are my like father, my God, my Lord. Like really like butters him up and is all like, if do kindness to me and I will like love you forever. I am indebted to you. You have an obligation to me. Fulfill it, and I will be, the most gracious creature. And that's sort of like he butters him up and gets him to come, and he sort of reminds Victor that he does have a responsibility to this thing, and that I think Victor even says it's like this sense of obligation and also curiosity to like hear like what did happen is what like draws him to listen.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, to be fair, like this thing just turned up and like can speak fluent French.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'd be curious.
Yeah, and I think when this line that Victor says also explains why he decides to listen to the Creature. So he says, for the first time also I felt what the duties of a creator towards his creature were, and that I ought to render him happy before I complained of his wickedness. So this just very much feels like very ironic and too little too late, really. Like, surely Victor's, I don't want to say error, but what he actually did was that he didn't consider this, and so resulted in the Creature's wickedness in a way. I mean, because the Creature's blameless and all that.
Shut up. And then I think to relate that back to Elizabeth's speech and her like desire to hide away in her like native country after like sort of having this coming of age moment and realizing just how bad things get is, this sense that you really can never return to this innocence. So Victor can comply with the Creature's demands, which I think Nancy said before. He asked Victor to make him a female companion. And we'll say, like, if you give me this, I will go off into, like, the wilderness and we'll just live a, like, secluded, happy life. But that's just as naive as Elizabeth's desire to retreat into themselves. It's like once you sort of know how bad things are or, like, have a greater understanding of the world, you can never return to that sort of childhood innocence.
Yeah.
So as much as Victor may want to help the Creature, he can't give him back innocence. That's completely lost.
Yeah.
And in fact, the thing he's gonna agree to give him is not the solution to like fixing or mending anything. It's just creating more ethical quandaries and like drama, and in a sense it's more denying his obligation to the creature than owning up to it, because he's like gonna give the creature something and then expects the creature to like go away forever. Whereas really the most responsible thing he can do is, I guess, take the creature into his home. But at this point that's also kind of impossible because of what has happened to William. So it's kind of, at this point it's already too late for anything to be fixed. It's kind of, we're on a domino effect, just spiraling downward. Dominoes don't spiral, but you know what I mean.
They can. But I think what you're saying about the fact that it's always too late is so true. And it's so much into that, and it's related to that biblical parallel, I think, as well, that the whole novel kind of starts on, which is, you know, it's already too late because, you know, Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve kind of thing. It's like you already have the knowledge of good and evil, and so you can never return to that prelapsarian state. So that's a new word that I learned.
Good on you.
But yeah, I think that's super interesting, and it further emphasizes the sort of religious parallels that we have and the parallels with Paradise Lost. That's all throughout the novel as well.
Yeah, it's weird that like a novel that really denies the existence of religion at all has such a strong paratext, would you call it, with Paradise Lost? I don't think that's the right word. Intertextuality?
Yes, I would say it's intertextuality, because it's not really outside of the text itself. No. It's very much, you know, works within the text and has some very obvious parallels and callbacks, I guess.
I mean, and I think Paradise Lost in of itself is like an interesting departure from, I guess, institutionalized religion, because it does show God as kind of a tyrant. And it shows Satan as, you know, I think Blake called Milton like of the devil's party without knowing it or something. I don't know if that's a good quote. Like the correct quote. Well, it sounds cool. So let's say it is.
Okay.
Anyhow, so let's give this the old wrap up. So to do a bit of housekeeping, we now have an Instagram account where you can catch us between episodes if we post things between episodes, which I do from time to time. And so it is called _postmodern_Prometheus. I might change the name to something else once this picks up a little bit, but at the moment it's that. Yeah. Our podcast is now available on both SoundCloud and YouTube, and hopefully soon it will be available on iTunes as well. We're just ironing out the kinks with that.
Yeah.
If you can also get us on our email address, the postmodernprometheus.gmail.com. Postmodern Prometheus Podcast@gmail.com.
Yes.
But you can also, if you've got requests or comments, just leave them. Yeah, you can leave them on our YouTube or SoundCloud. Can you leave comments on SoundCloud?
Yes.
You can leave the comments on our YouTube or SoundCloud page. You can, like, throw us little messages on Instagram. We might, if things pick up a bit, start up a Facebook account too, if it's easier to ask questions there. But yes, if you want to contact us, say we're doing a good job, say we're doing a shit job, or just like maybe ask for a request of something for us to review or talk about, we would love to hear from you. We're very lonely over here. We really need some kind of validation to know that people care.
Yes, that is true. We are both suckers for validation.
But yeah, and if these podcasts are a bit too much, you can just follow us on our Instagram, where it's me just taking pictures of my little plushy Frankenstein's monster that my grandmother made me for Christmas. I just sort of take pictures of him doing random stuff around the house sometimes. If you like want to support us, but these podcasts are a bit too long. I should have said that at the start of the episode.
How could anyone think these podcasts are too long? Like 2 hours of discussing Frankenstein is not enough.
Yeah, the only final thing I think we need to add is the moment of silence for the last time Ernest is mentioned by name, which I think is in this section. I don't think he's not mentioned by name, then he's just like lumped in with the family, and then he's just not mentioned at all.
Farewell, so Ernest.
I hope you've all cherished this time we've had with Ernest.
The most valuable player in this novel.
Yes. He taught us a lot. He taught us about being honest about our failures and dreaming to be things even when we're maybe not smart enough to be things.
And most importantly, he taught us how to survive by just fading into the background and not being noticed by everyone. It reminds me of that other song from Chicago, the musical, Mr. Cellophane.
Cellophane. Should have been my name, Mr. Cellophane, 'cause you can see right through me. See right through me.